So found footage is kind of a weird thing. This is an all or nothing subgenre. People seem to either love it or hate it. The films themselves seem to either work or be completely ridiculous. Personally, I would not consider myself to be a big fan of it, but as someone who strongly believes that there are great films of pretty much any kind, I felt like I just had to explore it as much as I could and find those gems that even a skeptic like me would love. Hey everyone, I'm Mariana. This is Impression Blend, but before we get any further into what I think are found footage films that are actually worth your time, let's define found footage for the purposes of this video. Rather than only including films that present themselves as footage filmed by one of the characters that's been actually somehow found, I'm also including mockumentaries or pseudo-documentaries, whichever term you prefer. The reason for this is that the idea is still the same between the two. It's footage that's presented as a first-hand account of something the movie wants us to perceive as a true story. It involves what's supposed to be naturalistic acting and raw camera work. I guess that's a big part of the appeal of found footage to the audience. It's supposed to make us feel more immersed in what we're watching unfold on screen because it's meant to feel more real. Ironically though, what this often means is lazy writing, cheap jump scares, and an attempt to make a big profit by cutting the costs of production to a minimum. But we are here to talk about the best examples of this, the films that used the technique in the best ways, in the way that makes sense, and the films that are actually worth your time. Starting off this list are two films that belong to the same franchise, which I already mentioned in my best Halloween movies you can stream right now video, Creep and Creep 2. These two movies just work. I am not saying they're masterpieces, but they are simple concepts done right. Mark Duplass plays a man who is looking for a videographer on Craigslist to film him throughout the day. Why does he do this? You would have to watch the movies to find out, but needless to say, things get weird, unsettling, and well, just creepy. Both of the films are really good. I personally even prefer this sequel to the original. I liked the way it built on the original concept, and somehow the sequel is weirder, creepier, and funnier than the first film. They are apparently making a third one, and I am actually really looking forward to that one. But in the meantime, if you haven't seen the first two, check them out for the creepy weirdness that is Mark Duplass in those movies. The Sacrament is a film I watched very recently, did not have high expectations for, and was very pleasantly surprised by. Though I guess what gives this one an edge is that it is inspired by real-life events. The story centers around a cult and is very clearly based on the Jonestown Massacre, with their leader referred to simply as Father being heavily inspired by Jim Jones. The film updates the setup by having the story take place in present day, and we see it through the eyes of Vice journalists. While I still wish this one went a little bit deeper into the dynamics of the cult, how the manipulation works, why did the leader have the influence he did, I will say that The Sacrament is very effective at what it's trying to do. It is a pretty brief outsider view of the situation, but it's done really well. You're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen. It really pulls you in. There's a lot of great tension building, and knowing generally where it's headed somehow makes it even more stressful. You may be surprised to hear this, but Cloverfield is one of those films that I regret not seeing in a theater. Someone told me it was not good. I should not have listened to them because when I watched it later, I thought it was really cool, and I have rewatched it multiple times since then. I imagine most of you are familiar with Cloverfield, but if somehow you aren't, the film is set in New York, where a monster descends upon upon the city, everything turns into chaos, and even though everyone is in danger of dying, the guy filming will not put down the camera. The funny thing is, there are plenty of things in this film that would normally really bother me. There is shaky cam, there are characters being ridiculous, there is what you can only describe as horror movie logic, and yet this movie just has something special. It comes down to being well-paced, effectively executed, it has some iconic imagery, it has a cool monster, and it is a surprisingly fun movie to theorize about and look for hidden clues in. It's a fun time. Alright, I don't think we could talk about found footage without talking about the Blair Witch Project. It's not the first found footage film ever made, but it is the first one that comes to mind for most of us. 3 student filmmakers who set out to film a documentary about a local legend end up lost in the woods. Did they actually lose their way, or is there something in the woods that's not willing to let them go? I actually didn't see this movie until 2016, and I'm not going to lie, I was underwhelmed, and I initially brushed it off as something that just didn't age well. And then I realized it really stuck with me. I have watched it every year since then, and it's actually become one of my Halloween season viewing traditions. The thing about the Blair Witch Project is that it captured a certain level of authenticity that so many found footage films after it have failed to replicate. It's not the scariest film you'll see, and it doesn't have the most fascinating story, but it has a certain unique haunting quality to it. This is a movie I've appreciated more and more with every viewing. Plus, the behind-the-scenes stuff and the mythology they came up with for this is actually fascinating. Now, my next pick is also about a group of students making a documentary, investigating something, and getting a lot more than what they bargained for. I am talking about Trollhunter, a Norwegian film where a dark folktale meets the modern world. Here, the students are investigating bear killings. They think they are dealing with a bear poacher, but it turns out their suspect is actually hunting trolls. Once they convince him to take them troll hunting with him, the real fun begins. First of all, this is obviously a pretty unique film. There just aren't that many horror films out there that lean into Norwegian mythology and trolls. Second, Trollhunter is really entertaining and actually very funny. It's part horror movie, though more a dark fantasy film than horror, part satire, and it does both really well. It's memorable, it's well written, it even has some social commentary, and yes, the found footage aspect definitely plays into all of this. It's simply a must-watch. Wreck is a film I regularly recommend to horror fans who have not seen it yet. This is a Spanish film that has an American remake titled Quarantine, but of course it's not as good as the original, so I wouldn't really bother with that one. But as far as straight up found footage horror goes, Wreck is as good as it gets. What starts off as a television reporter covering a night shift at a local fire station turns into chaos when she follows them on a call to an apartment building. They quickly find themselves locked inside and quarantined with the residents, facing a very strange outbreak. The film checks all the boxes. It delivers the scares, it has a story that unfolds at a great pace, it has a likable lead character, it has a reason for the cameraman to keep recording. This is a movie that knows what it is and what it's doing. I think even people who are not into found footage would appreciate this film, given that they're still into horror films. Wreck really understands how to use the found footage gimmick while constantly building up tension and how to deliver the payoff in the third act. Now, we are taking a step away from horror with this one because Chronicle is a sci-fi thriller rather than a horror film, but it is one of the best found footage films ever made, and it's one of my personal favorites. Chronicle follows 3 high school students whose discovery leads them to developing superpowers. As any teenager would, they use them for pranks at first, but as they learn to control them and get stronger, things start taking a darker turn. What I love about this film is that I believe this is exactly what would happen if some people, especially teenagers, randomly developed superpowers. Most of us would like to believe that we would all become superheroes and use our new abilities for good, but it is much more likely that we would let the powers corrupt us. Also, the cast here is really good, including Dane DeHaan, Michael B. Jordan, and Alex Russell. This was the first movie I saw Dane DeHaan and Michael B. Jordan in, and they definitely stand out as very memorable performances. Found footage or not, this is just a very good and very underappreciated sci-fi thriller. And speaking of underappreciated, at number 1, I have what I believe is one of the most underrated horror films of the past 20 years, Lake Mungo. This is something I randomly stumbled upon a few years ago, and I was shocked that barely anyone talks about it. This horror mystery is told in the mockumentary style and revolves around a family grieving the loss of Alice Palmer, a beloved daughter and sister. Her body is found in the lake, but the family starts experiencing strange occurrences that lead them to discover there was a lot they didn't know about Alice to begin with. First of all, this is a really great example of found footage and mockumentary style use. It's so effective that I actually had to pause this movie the first time I was watching it and make sure I wasn't watching a real documentary. This sounds really silly, but that is just how authentic this film felt. Part of that has to do with the surprisingly good acting and natural dialogue. Part of it is the story itself and the way it unfolds. It's not at all your typical found footage movie, but also it's just a great horror mystery. It's sad and moody, it's spooky, it gets under your skin, it pulls you in, and it makes you care about the characters. You want to know what's going on with this family. It's great. Lake Mungo deserves so much more attention than what it's been getting, and it is absolutely worth your time. And that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would love to know what your favorite found footage films are. What do you think makes found footage work to begin with, and what are some great examples of that? As always, thank you so much to all of you for watching this video. A special thank you to all of my patrons who are supporting me on Patreon, and an extra special thank you to the patrons whose names are on the screen right now. But of course, thank you to every single one of you who made it to the end. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.